How to form complex sentences type 2 using subordinating conjunctions. Okay, before we start, we need to review a few things. First of all, why are we even talking about complex sentences and how to write them? Well, remember your 6 traits of writing? We started off with main idea, organization, voice, and these 3 steps are really in the planning stage of writing anything. Once you have written your draft, you need to edit it. The first step in editing is check your sentence fluency. By fluency, we mean the type of sentences you use, a good mix of them, using them as appropriate, and having the whole thing flow just like a river. So, among the types of sentences we have here, the one we're talking about today are complex sentences. This means we have at least 2 or more clauses in one sentence. All right then, you may ask, what is a clause? A clause basically is a group of words that contains at least one or at least the conjugated verb. So you might say, isn't that a simple sentence? Actually, yes, a simple sentence is made up of one clause. In a complex sentence, you will have usually a main clause and at least one subordinate clause. Here are easy mnemonics for you. Main clause starts with M and mother starts with M too. A subordinate clause starts with S and a son starts with S. Now, why do we need this mnemonic? Because a main clause is the main idea of this sentence. Later in the videos on how to edit your writing, you will see how many times a student might write your main idea into a subordinate clause when it should be in the main clause. So the main clause is the mother. So the important person here is the mother. She holds by the hand a son. So the son is less important and would not exist if not for the mother. All right? However, in real writing, you don't have complex sentences made up only of 2 clauses. Very often you might have a main clause and maybe 1 subordinate clause, 2, 3, or 4 subordinate clauses, or even more. Sometimes your main clause, the mother, might have a son who has a grandson, okay? And then another son who also has a grandson, right? So you might have several generations of clauses. All right, let's look again at our complex sentences. Well, there's a series of videos on the first type, which are complex sentences made up using a relative pronoun. But today we're going to look at a much simpler type of complex sentence, the one that's made up using a subordinating conjunction, which I'm going to call here type 2 complex sentence. Okay, so your first question here is, what is a conjunction, or what is a subordinating conjunction? And we are going to start by reviewing a little bit. So a conjunction, which is a noun, comes from the word to conjoin, join, meaning to join together. So what can we join? We could join words, phrases, and in this case here we're talking about clauses. So a conjunction will join 2 clauses together. There are generally 3 types of conjunctions, and we're going to talk about them as they connect clauses, not words or phrases, okay? So the coordinating conjunctions, we can talk about that in a different video. They form compound sentences. The correlating conjunctions also do that, generally. And then we are talking about today the subordinating. And if you remember the picture of the king and his subject, a subordinate is somebody who is lower in status than somebody else, okay? Like the subject and the king, or the son and the mother, all right? So there's somebody on a higher level and somebody on a lower level. And thus we form a complex sentence. Examples here are as, after, because. All right, this is how we do it. First, we have a main clause. Jim went to bed. And then we have a subordinate clause. He completed, or Jim completed, his homework. We want to put them together. We pick a subordinating conjunction, in this case, after. We stick it right before the subordinate clause. And here we go. Ta-da! A complex sentence. How hard was that? Jim went to bed after he completed his homework. So far, so good. You might have thought, this is so easy. I do that all the time. I can do this. Now, this is where it gets interesting. There's another way of forming a complex sentence. You put the main clause in the back and you start off with your subordinate clause. Now remember, the subordinate clause must have the subordinating conjunction stuck right before it. Okay? In other words, you start with the subordinating conjunction, you follow with the clause, then you must add something new here. You add a comma. You must have a comma. And that's the main difference between this type of formation and the one we just started with. So Jim went to bed goes to the back now. He completed his homework goes to the front, and the subordinating conjunction goes to the front of that. So after he completed his homework, comma, Jim went to bed. So how many subordinating conjunctions do we have, and what are they? The truth is there are plenty of them, at least 100, 150. You can even write up your own, okay? It doesn't really matter as long as it fulfills the correct job, the correct function. But here are a sample of the most commonly used subordinating conjunctions. And if you look at them, something as simple as after, because, before, when, rather than, so that. And I have to caution you, many of these are often not just a subordinating conjunction but something else as well. Look at when, for example. Come on, we do know that when could be, for example, what? A pronoun, right? Because there are so many of them, it is useful to classify them a little bit into a few categories. So some of them introduce a cause or an effect. All right, for example, you say because. Tom stayed home because he thought it was a holiday. So because introduces the reason why Tom stayed home. But you could also use it for an effect, for example, all right? Time and place, after, before, until, all of these introduces an idea that has to do with the time that the main clause occurred. Opposites. Now, you may not think of it as opposite. If you think about it carefully, it is opposite. You say although. If you say although something, then something else, that really means you're going to do the opposite of it. Even if it rains, the swim meet will take place tomorrow. So if it rains, normally you're thinking of the swim meet being cancelled. But here's the even if, meaning that it will not be cancelled, it will still take place. And then you have a lot of either descriptions or comparisons, as if, as long as though, for example, I will take care of my mother as long as I am able to. Then finally we come to a very, very special conjunction. So I'm going to call it the special one. And it is a conjunction that. For example, Mr. Brown said that he didn't know the way to the post office. Now, that is very commonly used, so we need to talk a little bit more about this. As a subordinating conjunction, that will introduce a statement or hypothesis and usually follows a word that means to say. For example, to say, or to tell, to state, to vow, to swear, to whisper. He said that, such and such. He told me that, something. He swore to he swore that he will love me forever, or something like that. But I want you to pay attention. That is also a demonstrative pronoun, for example. That's a good idea. A relative pronoun, for example, is the thing that moved. A determiner, for example, that chair over there is mine. An adverb, did it go that fast? So don't just look at that as a hope. That is a subordinating conjunction. No, it could be something else. Look at it carefully before you make a decision. Now, somehow, nobody knows exactly how that happened. Teachers in school started believing in a myth, which is that never start a sentence with because, which often goes hand in hand with never start a sentence with a conjunction. We just saw that that is untrue. If you put the subordinating clause in front of the main clause, obviously it's going to start with because, or the subordinating conjunction we're talking about. Now, I think the reason might be because many children just say, because I like it, or something like that, right? So you cannot have a simple sentence starting with because, but if it's a complex sentence, obviously you can. So that's where I think the myth came from, and where the teachers forbid you to start your simple sentence with because, but in a complex one, it's all right, obviously. So this was an introduction on subordinating conjunctions and complex sentences using them. I hope you understood, and please do check out the next lesson for more on complex sentences using subordinating conjunctions. Bye for now.